it makes me laugh, or um,
I'm I'm affected by it, but not that much because I'm not really into. I'm a bit disconnected from it. I think it's very personal because some people are going to be really like into the news and like whatever is happening, and I'm lately very disconnected from it. The Paris attack and like stuff like this, and because it's where I'm from, and it happened like in the street where my sister lives, and like da da da. It's like of course you get involved, and of course it's like shocking, but like I don't I don't know. I feel like I don't know. I feel like everything is going wrong anyways, and like I'm affected. I'm affected by it because it's like everything is like every week you get a new news that makes you really like think like what is happening in this world. Where like how is it like going? And I'm just like I'm really upset because I want to. It's actually giving me like a will to do something. Like I want to create more. I want to do more work. I want to like I don't know. I want to like be like myself invested in this world and like not listen to whatever is happening, but like really try to like bring out the tiniest hope that is left. So that's what it makes.
How does it affect my daily life? I don't know. I just kind of just take it as it comes. It's quite interesting. If you take like Trump or anything. Oh no, Brexit vote. I remember coming in on the tube in the morning and feeling this kind of like connection with everybody around me, even though no one was talking. It was kind of like there was this solemnness. But there's kind of it's just so big and kind of shocking and constant at the moment that you just accept it almost, and it's becoming more every day, I guess.
It affects me heavily considering how much I'm kind of within the bubble of my work. I go off so much off to find out what's going on because I genuinely don't have time to see it live, like retrospective news or news flashes, especially on social media, which I've more and more seen as being very dangerous just because what I sign up to on social media will give me a very narrow view of something. I try and avoid it, but if having the Independent and the Guardian up on my Facebook, it kind of gives me a very certain look at things. Being signed up to certain politicians' news feeds, they'll only get their side of the argument. I've seen it affect me in bad and in good ways. Good ways, I think, especially with newspapers, especially tabloid papers, seeing how narrow that view is and sort of reacting against that, especially in the last election, how they treated their Miliband. I thought was reprehensible in having no partisan view in that way, but also allowing, I can see myself and other people being allowed to be into bubbles for that news, and overreacting to things just on just the title and all those things, especially because it's got so narrowed down within the social media thing. And just one title can be very misinterpreted, and it can change your view entirely on something. Tony Blair talking about Jeremy Corbyn was horrifically taken out of context, said Tony Blair, when he was reported on saying he was an awful leader, which was taken out of context. Without people investigating or having a little thought, it affects my life in a big way and can change my view on the subject. I've changed my view on Jeremy Corbyn truly because I've realised I've been seeing a narrow view on it because of the news.
Breaking news affects my daily life through the emotions that I feel throughout the day. I like to follow the news and see what's happening, but it doesn't affect me too much, especially when it's things that are further removed.
I tend to check them every day, and I don't believe they affect my life, like from a practical point of view. They just like affect my thoughts, but that's it.
News informs me. That's what I'd say. But I feel like is each their own in terms of what news sources you want to take. It's like BBC and Guardian, all of that sort of left wing. But like I recently got my free £4 subscription to the Financial Times, which I feel is I don't know, has changed my perspective on things. It doesn't have much fluff, so it's like just to the points of like the raw economics of I don't know, everything going on. But like I don't know, news doesn't really affect my life. Like it affects my life in that I get angry at my friends like sharing shit. So like I hate the Independent. That's my thing. Clickbait. Hate fake news.
They're a topic to talk with people that I don't share my everyday life with. So when I arrive to work, there's always something to talk about. I don't. When you refer news as a lot of sources, I stopped watching TV already a long time ago, and I get most of the information from online tools.
I try not to read the news very much. I used to do it a lot and it depressed me. So I think one of the things I like most about living outside my country is that I feel a bit more removed from the horrible political and social events in America. So yeah, I try to be a bit detached from the day-to-day news cycle.
It doesn't affect my daily life, I must say. I think there is two ways during my day I approach the news, and one is when I'm looking at them, when I watch news on the television, when I read about the news in a newspaper, and at that moment I think about that. I have a piece of thinking about what is happening, what I'm looking at, and that is just, you know, it's just being with yourself and kind of reinterpreting what you see and trying to be as detached as possible from the news, and to see, kind of trying to see if the news, it's how do you say, it's the truth, or if it's affected by something in some way. But during my day, when I go do my stuff, when I go studying, when I'm with my friends, I don't think news will affect me in any way. Maybe if it's a really, really bad one. For example, I remember I was in Berlin the day when there was the attack in Munich, and in the mall, and the day after I had to stay 3 hours in the Berlin train station. And that was horrible. I mean, I just stayed there 3 hours trying to hide from huge crowds, trying to go in small places because I was scared. I was very scared. So it's not really the news itself that affects me, but the fact, maybe.
I honestly have zero dependence on the mainstream news, to be honest. Like the news that you find on big news channels, or basically any mainstream channel that says the news, I have zero belief in them. I stopped listening to them, I stopped following those news. And also the news on Facebook or like social media, they're not very dependent. You cannot really depend on the news. So it's becoming more of a one-on-one kind of interaction with actual people, rather than getting the news from somewhere else. That's how I perceive the news. Yeah.
So I generally check news on my phone. So I will check a couple of news sources, probably primarily the first one is like BBC website because I think it's sort of impartial, or they try and give a balanced view. And the second one is probably social media to see what other people in my network are looking at. I would generally say that it does impact my mood. So if there's like a lot of negative news about Trump at the moment, and it can generally make you feel quite depressed or sort of helpless to affect change, I guess, because it's outside your sphere of influence.
I mean, I read them in the morning, and I think about them, and then it's something I bond over with politics people when I meet them. Not much more.
To avoid news as much as possible. Don't get me wrong, I like to keep myself informed, but that's just through reading a lot of different sources. Because I guess nowadays you can get media which is either too liberal or too conservative, so there's never like a neutral sort of real news where they challenge whatever's going on. But how does it affect my life? It kind of makes me angry at some point, because I think it's quite engineered nowadays to make people angry, and it actually really works. No matter how much you don't relate to the ideas they give, they still manage to trigger some sort of emotions, you know? So I guess they do, in a sense, they do tend to be a catalyst in developing hate, and for some people it worked already. That's why I rather, you know, avoid news, but at the same time it's quite hard not to, because if you do, then you have no clue what's going on. So that's quite tough.
In general, I tend not to read news, especially like lately, as if because I have like a lot of uni work to do. So I usually don't have time to read news. It doesn't matter whether newspapers or online. Usually, I hear the news from my friends, so it's more like a quick chat about what's going on in the world, giving my like a brief opinion about it. So far, I guess the most shocking thing for me was Brexit, mainly because I'm a part of EU, as I'm technically from Latvia, but it doesn't have like a really big influence. At least it hasn't changed my view of the world in general, and it hasn't affected me directly, so I guess I tend to be quite indifferent towards that.
I'd say, I mean, it affects it in different ways. I think one of the things is how it affects other people and the way they treat everyone else. So like recently I'd say daily news would affect me because a lot of it is very like Arab associated and stuff, and being like from the Arab world, sometimes like I don't associate myself with these things at all, but people will associate me to them, which yeah, I guess affects me. Also, it could have like an emotional effect, I guess. Like you wake up, you're having a good day, then you read something and it can be just like knock you back a little bit.
So I read the most I read the only news is with social media, so Facebook or Instagram. It doesn't affect directly my life or my work, but I'm quite concerned about it, and it's hard to explain, but it's like feeling how is evolving the world. No, actually, it does impact my work. I'm trying to work like on some quality stuff, like quality clothes and stuff like this. Whereas the world is going a bit like trash, and all the values that are a bit goes down. So I think this is impacting my life in this way, but not directly as my personal life, of course. And also in my point of view, because we have the French election soon, and we also have like a quite Le Pen, which is quite as Trump, a bit extreme and racist. So
Just a bit, yeah.
voilà, so it's that's also one of my concerns. Yeah.
Well, I read it every day. It kind of annoys me, to be honest. I don't trust a lot of the news, and it just makes me feel a bit like lied to constantly. When everything you read, you have to like fact check and take a pinch of salt.
The daily news these days are so negative, so I try to think about positive things, about the new invention, the new technology that exists, to not feeling too depressed about what's happening in our life that days, because it's really frustrating because there's nothing we can do about it. Just we can just manifest and go to those events, but yeah, I'm trying to be positive and try to think not too much about it, because it really depressed me a lot.
Well, mostly I watched and I listened to it on the radio or on I read it on the computer. I think it sort of creates a conversation. I think with the people I'm with at work, it's mostly that's mostly what I'm doing really. It's just talking about what's in the news. Yeah, other than that, I think pretty unaffected, considering I'm living in London.
I try to avoid it because I'm quite skeptical of the news, because it's quite biased towards portraying people of colour or particularly Muslims in a bad light, so I kind of just stray away from it. And so my main news outlet would be so other articles that people that I trust have posted, and I read up on that. Or if I do watch the news, I'm very critical of it.
I feel like when I watch the news, it's sort of the biggest stuff and the most influential stuff is it's quite important, but it feels quite distant. So stuff like politics or things going on in the world, they're happening, and I can empathise with the people who are involved, but it's I can still distance myself from the topics. So I feel connected, but still not quite engaged.
Actually, I have no many feeling or thinking for that.
The daily news, I suppose, it just keeps me up to date with the world, and yeah, I can't say I watch much news. I just kind of flick through the Daily Mail app on my phone, which I know isn't really the most trustworthy source, but it's quite entertaining.
The news, I find it quite scary because a lot of what happens in the world, it has a lot of effects on your life that sometimes they're not immediately obvious, so it takes a while for it to like trickle through down to you. So like with Trump, for example, we're obviously not in the country, but it will affect us by like a trickling knock-on domino effect. So it's kind of like the gravity of it hasn't quite hit us yet. But I mean, it's hit lots of people, but as I'm a white male, it's kind of like I'm yet to experience the effects of it that other people have experienced now.
I'm not a guy that used to watch breaking news or something, but actually when when they're talking about like terrorist attacks and something like that, I'm always a bit paranoid about that, like tube strike and something like that. So yeah, I'm a bit paranoid on that, maybe. Yeah.
The news makes people more anxious, I think. Maybe kind of sad.
Who is in Midtown Manhattan, overlooking all of this. As you can see there, communications have been severely interrupted. David?
Well, Tom, what we're looking at behind us, more than 4 hours after the first explosion, is the smoking hulk of the essentially vanished World Trade Center.
I don't really remember 9/11. I think I've never ever seen like footage about the actual terrorist attack, but I remember there was a lot of noise around it. But that's it.
How do I remember? I know where I was. It was such a big event, and I guess this is a bit of a cliche, but it seemed a bit of fiction. It didn't seem real, and then it became very real. It was so far away that I didn't, and as I had no relatives or friends living in New York at the time, I didn't have this emotional engagement. I saw it as a tragedy, as big as or any other war.
I was like 7 when that happened, so I didn't really know what was going on. But, and when I was in school, no one was expecting that to happen, and people kept on like being picked up by their parents. And like 7 people left my class. My school wasn't downtown, it was like on the east side on 77th Street. So like we didn't have any of like the fumes, we didn't see it, we didn't hear it. But like everyone kept getting picked up. And then my parents like came and picked me up, and I was like, oh cool, I can eat lunch like early. And then I like got in the car, and it was just like really quiet, and like everywhere we went it was just like really, really quiet, and it was like really, really sad. And it was like really dirty and dusty, like everywhere in Manhattan, even like way uptown by the water. It was just like really dusty and like dirty, and like everyone was just really sad and like quiet. Like usually New York is like really loud and like bustling, but everyone was so like gentle to each other, and like I don't know, that was like 9/11 when you're from like a 7-year-old's perspective.
Young, so I don't really remember that much, but like I try to hope that it's not gonna happen again, but like in some part in my head, like it's like I don't know, there's something that's gonna happen in the future soon or not soon, I don't know, but I'm trying to prepare myself for it.
Well, I think because my uncle was flying on the same day to New York, so I just remember my auntie going nuts and phoning us up, being like, I don't know what's going on. Luckily, it was fine. So that's.
I just remember it from. I just remember my dad actually. Like I don't really have. I think it was more parents' generation that were really like shocked by it. I just remember that my dad was like screaming and was like, "You have to turn on the TV now," and like everything stopped. The whole world stopped for like a second. Everything stopped. You couldn't talk. You had to watch the TV. You had to like listen to whatever they were saying, see the images, shocking, blah blah blah. And it was like I just remember this moment of like I was a kid, so I wasn't. I just remembered that for half an hour I couldn't even talk. It was like that's my memory of like, wait, something important is happening. I need to watch it. You don't understand it yet, but I need to watch it. Like, yeah, that's what I remember of it.
I don't. I remember 9/11 through. If you've ever seen the documentary Zeitgeist, I remember it through that. That's so it's just mad paranoia. There you go.
I was 12 years old on a trip going to Disneyland Paris, and we're staying in this hostel on the way there. It's me and two of the guys, two Muslim guys, very importantly, I think, actually. I remember skipping it through, and then we got to the news, and then seeing it, and not fully comprehending straight away, just being 12, that how significant it was and how much it would change, and then knowing from before and afterwards growing up and being surrounded by loads of Muslim people and loads of very bigoted white people, seeing their changed views from the change of the Muslims, the fear and rejection of being thought to be feared, and seeing the security tighten up, how lax security was comparatively before and afterwards, but also seeing how the change of security didn't actually change anything. There was at all, it was just shows, theatre, complete theatre, and seeing how it doesn't actually stop anything, but it makes you feel safer, and this ongoing view of going, well, as long as it looks safe, it'll be better. And the news kind of propagating of that as well within that, if referring to your other question, it comes together that since 9/11, the biggest change I've seen is that people not just pretending everything's fine. Because if it looks fine and people look like they're doing stuff, it is, and not actually addressing problems anymore.
Well, I was a kid. I was in the kindergarten thing. I was old enough to actually go back home by myself. So I obviously didn't know anything until I got home, and I just remember my mom watching the telly. I remember seeing the towers on the telly constantly playing, of them being with the plane colliding with the towers and then collapsing. I just didn't understand the actual situation myself, to be honest with you. I guess I was too young. I was more concerned with my mother crying, because she did cry as she was watching. So I was more concerned about that, about her. So I never really felt like a huge impact, because I was a very young child. I guess later I began to understand what actually happened, but that was much later. But it never felt shocking anymore, because it's something that happened and I grew up with knowing that happened, but I was too young to be affected emotionally about it. So I guess it never had a huge emotional impact on me.
I don't remember 9/11, I'm 19, and when 9/11 happened, I was 4 years old. I remember, I kind of remember all the things that happened next in the next years. I remember quite well the war in Iraq and then Afghanistan, and I always had this sensation of 9/11 as something that happened a long time before those things, but actually happened just straight away before. And for me, maybe the two events, the war and the attack, were always kind of separated in a way. I always had my parents telling me about when it happened, and telling me about this video of the plane crashing into the building, shown lots of times continuously, and that video, they would see that video in their minds for a week. They will have that video during the daily life. So it was very kind of how do you say, visual horrible, terrifying experience, but it was visual, something that you had never seen for a long time. A plane crashing into something so solid and so powerful, right? And then that just coming down, everything just destroyed.
Oh gosh, that was a long time ago. Actually, I don't remember it that much because I didn't read about it. I didn't research that. I guess it was more. I remember like things that my parents were talking about or discussing or complaining, or how like other people or older than me reacted to that. It's more, I guess it makes me think that in somewhat way the world is self-destructing. It's like it's breaking itself apart, and it makes me feel sad and afraid at the same time. But I just tend not to pay attention to all the bad things that are happening in the world.
I don't remember it happening. I was 3 at the time, but I think it was sort of something which started as like quite a serious thing where I started to really uncover what happened, and then over the years it sort of became more and more lighthearted, and then I suppose it's quite dark, but it's sort of become more and more of like a joke or a throwaway comment, which isn't very good, but it's sort of lost its impact on me. But yeah.
Well, I learned about it. I was in high school. I was like 15, and I would get a ride to school with my friend. So he came in the morning and he said, "You got to turn on the TV. Like some planes just crashed into the World Trade Center, and I don't know what's going on." And turn on the TV and I found out about it, and I was shocked. And it was like shocking and kind of exciting. And it also felt a bit distant because I'm from the West Coast, and so New York is a bit far away. I didn't feel like I was like personally under attack, but yeah, it was exciting. And then after that, I got involved in sort of like demonstrations to try and stop the war in Afghanistan and stuff, which was, I guess, one of the first like political things that I did when I was a teenager.
I remember 9/11 actually very well because it was 2001 and I had to take a flight to America just like 2 months after the terrorist attack. So me and my mom were a bit afraid of all this thing, but actually it went all good.
I don't remember 9/11. I just remember the aftermath of it, really. Because, I mean, if I was probably in America, I would have remembered it more. But I just remember people talking about it, but I don't remember the actual event happening.
9/11 to me, before it was 9/11, was my dad's birthday, so it's my granddad's birthday. And I was only 7 at the time, so I don't really remember it that well.
I learned, I learned about 9/11 when I was like 13, and I don't remember it.
9/11, I remember, I was quite young when it happened, and I remember like walking home with my schoolmate, and he was telling me that it just happened, and we were in a bit of disbelief. And then I sat in my living room with my family and just watched the whole thing, and yeah, like it was just in awe, kind of what happened, and then awe and disbelief, I guess. That's probably the biggest thing ever, like from what I can remember.
I mean, I remember it, but like it was never like, I wasn't very well informed about it at school ever. It was mainly arguments like between, because we had a few Americans at school, and it would just be It's like, I know that it's like, it was like a massive deal, and equally, like, a lot of people felt like it was too, like, there were other, like, in comparison to other things, and it didn't have to, like, it had more weight and importance on it than others. But equally, I understand the whole, like, weight it has, because it's also, like, kind of like an unsolved, I mean, it is solved, but equally, like, there's a lot of, like, dark holes of things we don't understand about it.
That was a long time ago. I think I was 15, and I was in Egypt, in a house that we have by the sea, and I was with my friends, and we were watching, I don't know, like a play, something on TV, and suddenly it was breaking news. This thing happened, and it was like, it was very. When I was 15, things were not like, there wasn't really like, the internet wasn't really like at its peak. All we had was TV. The satellite was on, so that was the main thing. And I was watching, horrified with what's happening, and I can't remember much, to be honest. Like, I remember the smoke, and I remember the building, and I remember the lady was speaking, and she was saying that Muslims did this, and they were trying to imply that, trying to investigate. Meanwhile, the pilots, and there was like a bombers on the pilot, and it was very it was a very strange period for me. I was very confused as probably I was considered a child. Very confused. My friends was also very confused. We were on vacation, and that thing was happening. My family started calling me on the phone, saying, "Are you watching the news? You should watch the news." I don't know. Like, it was very I was very distressed at that point, and I was very. And it took me a while to understand or grasp the hugeness of this event. And even after like a month or two, I was still not really aware of like the complexity of the situation. And even up until now, to be honest, I'm not really. Up until now, I have no idea. I don't think anyone has an idea of what happened or who did this, or like, was it real? Was it fake? Was it a play? I don't know. Like, I lost completely faith in the reality of those events, because they tend to be, now that we know like the amount of fake news everywhere, anywhere, at any time, that they are basically can be simply used as political tools. Like, people use it to enforce certain politics on other people or other countries. So I don't know. Like, my memories of this event is very sad, and it's still very sad up until now, to be honest.
(9/11), I was in it was the end of the summer holiday in my first year of uni, and I remember I was in Leeds City Centre shopping with my cousin who was over visiting from Japan, and just swarms of people walk around like Currys and Dixons, all those electronic shops, just watching on the TV, and so you sort of have that goose pimple moment where you're like, oh my god, what's going on? So I rushed up to the screen, and we just saw like images of the first tower hitting, and then I went home sort of in a bit of shock, because at that time we thought maybe it was an accident, and then I just remember the newsreels as the second plane hit, and just thinking, oh my god, this is fucking awful. I didn't really know anyone personally who was in New York at that time, but I remember it was just a real life-changing moment.
don't remember the day because I was quite young, but I'm reading a book actually on this one from Bec Bédier, who's a French writer, and he's writing as if he was there at the last floor, and it's really strong book. I think it was one of the strongest books I've read about it, and it puts you in the inside of the event and not outside, because we've seen the outside and it's like something dramatic, but you don't feel like not concerned, but you don't feel it's like any war or anything.